I think with Blake, you see what you get. Like, she's just such a charismatic, fun, genuine human. And so she brought that to Lily's character. Like, I can't tell you how many times I laughed on screen, but she also makes me laugh off screen. She's such a nice, funny person. And I feel like someone called her a crown straightener. And I can't describe that, her in a better way. Like, she's such a girl's girl and just wants the best for everyone around her.
You say, yes, I did, and then, but it turns out that you're just trying to manipulate me, and then that will make things make sense.
And the button thing you came up with, which I don't know what would happen if you would have thought of that.
Yeah, I find that we apologize for asking for what we want a lot. I find myself like, I'm so sorry, thank you so much. You don't have to do that, but women are, seem perceived as being demanding or difficult.
Even before an issue has been joined, and also benefited from the fact that no defendant had been named, meaning no one could invoke the court's process to push back. Undisputed. They don't dispute that these requests were made, even though the complaint never mentioned the film or Jones' work at all. Undisputed. They don't dispute that filing the lawsuit and issuing the subpoena created a legal mechanism through which Lively, via Van Zandt, could pretend to legitimately obtain the documents Jones found on Abel's phone. Without a court-compelled process, Jones could not simply hand over records she found on one of her employees' phones. And while they admit that initiating the Van Zandt lawsuit and issuing the subpoena allowed them to request those categories of documents, they try to dodge the part that says Jones couldn't legally hand over an employee's phone data without court authority, calling that a legal conclusion. But did you notice how she completely ignored the part explicitly referencing the documents found on Janelle's phone? And she completely sidesteps that point, reducing it to categories of documents requested, as if that erases the fact that Jones could not legally turn over an employee's phone records without a court order. If that were truly the case, Blake, then why file the lawsuit in the first place? She also doesn't dispute that the New York Times published an article containing material from Janelle's phone, yet she tries to claim it's disputed that the article cited documents from Abel's phone that Van Zandt obtained, despite zero evidence supporting that. They are literally direct text messages from her phone. She now wants the judge to review the full contents instead of what's already been reported, admitting she handed everything over to the New York Times, which then published an article based on the phone she obtained through Van Zandt, a lawsuit she initiated specifically to avoid notifying anyone. And to dodge responsibility for speaking to the Times, she falls back on the CRD complaint, pretending that's the source. It's absolutely bananas. But the bottom line is this. She openly admits what we've been saying from day one. She used the Van Zandt lawsuit to get access to Jones' ex-employee's phone and all of its contents, material Jones had no right to access. And they filed in New York precisely because it allowed them to avoid notifying Jen Abel in California. Had the subpoena been issued in California, Jen Abel, Justin Baldoni, and Wayfair would all have been legally required to receive notice. So for months, Blake and her team, and allegedly her husband through their representatives, publicly pushed a narrative about Van Zandt that doesn't align with what they're now conceding in court. It's honestly wild. When you and I were looking directly at the filings and pointing out what was in black and white, they insisted it wasn't true, and now in their own responses, they're essentially saying, well, actually, yes. Then you get to the claims involving Jamie Heath, the trailer footage, and the birth-themed video Blake characterized as porn. Heath reportedly told Blake he showed the same material to another person present, Angie Giannetti, and Giannetti testified that what Heath showed her was the same material described in the lawsuit. Yet Lively's response disputes that, arguing Giannetti can't confirm the video she saw was the exact same one Lively saw. But what are the odds Heath was showing two completely different videos on the same set at the same time? You have a Sony executive disputing Blake's characterization under oath, and Blake still doubling down that this was the porn she was subjected to, even though it was not porn. And then there's the 17-point letter she claims was her protected activity, where she supposedly notified Wayfair of sexual harassment and put them on notice not to delete records by early November 2023. But the filing notes that Lively's email doesn't actually mention sexual harassment, discrimination, or any conduct rising to that level. Undisputed. The only thing she disputes is the idea that she was required to use specific buzzwords like sexual harassment or discrimination in order to trigger protection. Except those aren't buzzwords. Those are the actual terms used in protected activity reporting. If you're reporting sexual harassment or discrimination, you do have to say what happened. Seeing her legal team refer to those terms as buzzwords is honestly shocking, dismissive in a way that feels more like PR spin than legal reasoning. As someone who has personally experienced sexual harassment and assault, I cannot imagine confiding what happened only to be told I was using buzzwords. It's upsetting that this language is in a formal legal filing at all, especially when these are the very claims Lively says entitled her to protection, and now the terminology itself is being minimized as though it's just part of a script. And that's the part that blows my mind. They define buzzwords as fashionable, trendy phrases that sound technical but lack real meaning, yet they're applying that term to sexual harassment and discrimination. These are not buzzwords. They are legal terms with real weight, and calling them that is incredibly offensive. It shows how unseriously they seem to take the core issues of this case. Then there's the fact she doesn't dispute. She never contacted HR, not Sony's, not Wayfair's, not even an HR consultant. It's undisputed. She's claiming she engaged in protected activity by reporting sexual harassment, yet she admits she never went to Human Resources or filed any formal complaint. And her response? She claims the phrase formal sexual harassment complaint is vague. It's not vague, it's literally the established process for anyone in a workplace reporting harassment. And then the story about Jamie Heath supposedly barging into her trailer. She doesn't dispute that she invited him in, she just disputes whether he turned around the entire time, claiming he glanced her way at one point. Which, by the way, is exactly what Heath has said all along. It's the same pattern we saw with the birth scene video. She and Angie saw the same thing, Angie testifies to it, yet Blake continues insisting it was something else entirely. It's like she manufactures alternative versions of events, her own alternate facts that think people always joke about online. Honestly, if I were listening to her, I'd be saying, don't trust Blake. She's the fake news here. And then you get to another example. She disputes that Baldoni made positive comments about her. In August 2024, he told Entertainment Time, "I think Blake Lively is ready to act." That's undisputed. But she disputes that it was a positive comment because, in her view, the public linked it to rumors that she and Ryan rewrote scripts or made edits. So now she's essentially arguing that saying she should direct is not positive because people online connected it to rumors she herself is trying to distance from. It's wild logic, rejecting a compliment because it doesn't fit her narrative. And here's where Blake's alternative facts show up again, this time with the Shastri Flaw interview and that old little bump video the New York Times tried to use as evidence of some orchestrated smear campaign. Remember how the narrative was that because Shastri once supported Johnny Depp, she must somehow be connected to Melissa Nathan, and therefore Melissa must have told her to post the clip. Well, according to the filings, Blake hasn't put forward any evidence that the little bump video was anything but genuine, or that the defendants had any contact with the reporter in that clip. Undisputed. This was one of the New York Times' big proof points, the idea that this single video supposedly triggered a tidal wave of negativity, and now Blake is conceding she has no evidence to support that claim. When you start tugging at the thread of her lawsuit, it's like every claim starts unraveling another claim and another, which is exactly why people struggle to believe the overall narrative. Shastri always said she didn't believe Blake because Blake lied to her. She said Blake falsely tied her to a smear campaign she wasn't part of. And when you look at everything leading up to the film's edits and the premiere, Blake's team doesn't actually dispute much of it, including claims that Ryan was running around running his mouth. They don't dispute the testimony about Ryan allegedly calling WME or stories being planted, and they even chose to unredact a line Wayfair had previously kept hidden, the one saying Blake had been brilliantly choreographing this for a while as if she'd been orchestrating everything to keep Baldoni out of the premiere. That line had been redacted until she put it back into her own response. So WME's view, based on that text, was that the entire situation looked like a coordinated effort to take control of the film. And when the issue of marketing comes up, they try to pivot. Instead of acknowledging Maximum Effort handled it, they now say it was actually Wayfair-approved marketing, essentially calling it the studio's campaign. Once you go through the filings, the contradictions pile up to the point where it makes sense why they, in their summary judgment motion, didn't even try to argue or defend half of these points. They're claiming $160 million in damages, but the contract itself undercuts that argument. If she wants the contract enforced, she has to accept its rules on damages, and those rules don't support what she's asking for. It looks like her team knows this, which is why the damages section is so thin. And because she can't tie the defendants to planting stories, can't tie them to the Shastri video, and now openly concedes the Van Zandt subpoena strategy, her new explanation for the alleged smear campaign is algorithmic. She claims Wayfair boosted videos and posts that were supportive of
Intro 1.
Hey busties, welcome back to my channel. Remember when I broke the story about the Van Zon lawsuit and exposed the mechanism Blake, Ryan, and Ryan Reynolds allegedly used to obtain documents from Stephanie Jones? And remember how I said this lawsuit seemed like a total sham, completely devoid of any real factual allegations tied to Justin Baldoni, the film, or anything substantial? It was all about marketing, reputation control, and shutting down an employee they believed could damage their image. I said from the beginning, this doesn't make sense. Then they turned around and used the lawsuit as a mechanism to avoid service and keep everyone else in the dark. And do you remember how Blake Lively's team acted like all of this was totally normal, insisting it wasn't for those reasons and was simply a harmless discovery tool, and that all the outrage around Van Zon was misplaced? Well, Lively's attorneys just filed their response to the statement of facts. It's a 56.1, and it's filed in conjunction with the summary judgment. In their response, they don't dispute that Van Zon